Welcome back to another episode of Divine Journey 2. In the last episode, we got started in Botania, and we automated all of the 16 different flowers, and also automated living rock, living wood, and living matter. And also, since we unlocked Botania, we got access to the Tier 4 Blood Altar caps, which are the large bloodstone tiles, and as such, we now have a Tier 4 Blood Altar. And in between episodes, I went ahead and crafted a whole boatload of runes of augmented capacity. So we're now up to 108 buckets that we can store in our blood altar. In between episodes, I also went ahead and automated the runic altar. And how I did that is there is an interface down there. And then this crate here acts as like the buffer crate. And one thing to note on these patterns is along with all the input items needed for the runes, there is living rock and slime balls also added to this. And everything goes into the crate still, but everything except the slime ball will get extracted and put into this precision dropper here. All the items will get dropped on the runic altar. And once enough mana has gone into the runic altar, this mechanical user here has a wand of the forest, and that just completes the craft. And then to actually pick up the runes, there is a ranged collector here, which is filtered. And then once there is an item sitting in here, I have a few different relays and such. This is on comparator input, which just it'll emit a signal when there's at least one item in here. That goes to a repeater and back up to this item conduit here, which will both of these item conduits are on active with signal, and this will extract the rune and put it into the interface, and this will also extract the slime ball from here and put it back to the interface. And the reason I had to do it this way is blocking mode, it doesn't really work as intended with this, because once all the items go in here and then they get extracted and put on the actual precision dropper, there's no more items in here. So the interface is going to push the next set into here, and then they're going to get extracted and put on the runic altar. But the runic altar craft isn't going to be fast enough, so it's going to stop the craft when it gets more items. I also went ahead and automated some of the, or actually all of the tier 4 essences. They're not fully automated, obviously, because we don't have automated LP yet. But speaking of that, if we look into the quest book here, we have a couple more quests until we can get the Well of Suffering, which will allow us to automate our LP. So first of all, if we craft 4 beacons, we can actually upgrade our altar to tier 5, but we can't get the orb yet because we're still limited by some items. If we make a few dark cores, we can use those in some ritual stones. And then if we take 4 ritual stones and some compressed obsidian, we can get our master ritual stone. And also if we take some spellbinding cloth, some of the elemental inscription tools, we can also make our ritual diviner. Alright, I've gathered enough blank runes to go around the perimeter for the tier 5 blood altar. The last step is to just place the 4 beacons in the 4 corners. And we should have a tier 5 blood altar. There we go, we now have a tier 5 blood altar. If we want to progress any further and actually get the Well of Suffering, we're going to have to make this Ritual Diviner the Dusk version. But there is a slight problem here. We need this Crystallize Abyssal Night Cluster, which we can only get from the Crystallizer. And obviously that takes the Demon Crystallizer and some will we don't have yet. So we're going to sidetrack here for a second, since we also need the activation crystal to actually activate the ritual. And we're going to take this path down here. And first up, we're going to have to travel to a new dimension, so we need some wildwood portal blocks. So I gathered up everything here. It's just a couple different mana items and such. Now that we're in Appalachia, we actually need to find another dungeon and some key fragments. And I actually got lucky enough, there's actually a dungeon right here, and our portal is actually right over there. So the quest says we have to look for 8 rooms to find 8 different buttons, and they all give the different key fragments. So I guess I'm going to do a little searching, and I'll come back. Alright, we now have our 8 key fragments, and all you have to do is just turn it into the key in a crafting table. And I also went home quickly and deposited all of our stuff. And there was a slime pickaxe on the tool forge over here. And it's actually pretty decent. It has 4.7k durability. I also added an extra modifier and put some more haste on it. So that was a pretty good find. If we use our key on this door up here, we now have access to our another boss fight. And I guess we're ready. So let's go. Right, very easy boss. Just the nausea's annoying. But we should be able to access the treasure room now. And there is our chest. Our spikes and 1 magical core. And also another beacon. Alright, if we combine our 4 spikes, we can make our spike crown. Alright, now we have our resources from the Appalachia dimension. We're gonna have to make the altar of whatever that word is, both the top and bottom. And for the top, it's the heart in the center, 3 Appalachia chunks on the sides, 3 dread cloths, and 2 hybrid abyssalium blocks. And this takes a sacrifice. Alright, I've gone ahead and fought another boss to get another heart. And then for the bottom part, it's the crown, 4 of these hybrid abyssalium blocks, 1 suppression core, 1 dark core, and the gateway key. And it also takes 20,000 LP and a sacrifice. Alright, now that we have both the bottom and top of this altar, the questbook recommended going to a Dreadlands Mountains biome and digging down to Y40, which I've done. And all we have to do to get the dungeon is to place down the bottom and then the top. And then we should be able to enter. And here we are. Alright, after killing the boss, we got our gateway key. And we should be able to enter this now and claim our loot. Wow, that's very disappointing. Alright, I've gone ahead and gathered up the materials needed for the next quest, which include 1 Demon Will Aura Gauge, 1 Demon Crystallizer, 5 Demon Crucibles. Okay, I've actually had to come back to the Dreadlands dungeon here because I actually forgot to grab the Crystallizer, and we can't progress without it. Now that we have our Crystallizer, we actually need to crystallize a few different blocks into various items. Mainly blocks of coal gets crystallized into carbon clusters. Blaze meshes for crystallized blaze. Blocks of gold for crystallized gold clusters. And blocks of abyssalite for crystallized abyssalite clusters. Now we can make our lava crystal. And with 100,000 life essence, we can make our activation crystal. So it turns out we actually need to make the awakened activation crystal rather than just the weak activation crystal. And to do that, we're going to need this weather container, which takes this Scepter of Thunder, which means we have to make a Rune of Autumn, which is 1 Rune of Fire, 1 Rune of Water, 1 Living Matter, and 1 Tempest Core. And now we can make our Scepter of Thunder. So the reason we needed the Scepter of Thunder is for this weather container here, which is the Thunderstruck version, which basically, if you were to throw the weather container into the environmental accumulator, to actually get the Thunderstruck version, it obviously needs to be thundering, and that's what this scepter should do. Alright, and if we throw a weather container in, we should get the Thunderstruck version. There we go. The last thing we need for our awakened activation crystal is this light crystal, which takes a few different crystallized things, mainly hydrogen from water buckets and oxygen, niter for nitrate, rotten flesh for potassium, and sulfur for sulfur. We can also put this crystallized nitrate through the crystallizer to actually get pure nitrogen and oxygen. Alright, and we can make our life crystal now. And if we combine this with our weather container, Rune of Mana, and another star, we can make our awakened activation crystal. The last thing we need to make is the Dusk version of the Ritual Diviner, which takes this crystallized Abyssal Knight cluster, some spellbinding cloth, 2 inscription tools, the Dusk version, and 1 suppression core. Alright, so I've gone ahead and placed down 2 rituals. The first one down here is the Ritual of the Forsaken Souls, and then there's a block in between this ritual stone and that ritual stone. And this ritual is the Resonance of the Faceted Crystal. And I also have a powered spawner here for chickens. And basically, to actually automate our will production, the basic concept is these 2 rituals in combination. One of them is actually going to start damaging the mobs, and that's going to start putting will into the chunk. Well, not initially, actually. Initially, to actually get will into the chunk, we're going to use the different demon crucibles. And the questbook recommends a Tartaric Gem with at least 1,000 will inside. So if we actually put our crystallizer in the center here, this is actually where the first crystal is going to grow once there's enough will in the chunk. But to actually get started, I'm going to turn on this powered spawner and activate both of these rituals. There's one, and I have to break this. There's the other one. Alright, so the mobs are obviously getting damaged and killed, but this actually isn't doing anything, as we need to provide an initial source of will into the chunk, and we do that with these demon crucibles here. And if we place 1 Tartaric Gem in one of these, it should start draining, and we should start getting will in the chunk. There in the top left, we have 100 will, and there should be a crystal here in a second. Actually, it might take a bit, but I'm going to wait till this crystal grows here. Alright, there's our first crystal cluster, and this is actually going to take a little bit to start growing, but eventually this should split off into the 4 other types of will in a second here. There we go. There's our 4 different will clusters. And we actually don't want to harvest these yet. We actually want to wait for all of them to progress into their final stage. All right, all of our crystals are fully grown, and now we can harvest them. All right, now we actually have to take our crystals and actually convert them to the crystal clusters. But to actually do that, we need 1.2 thousand will, meaning we're going to have to upgrade our Tartaric Gem once again. And to do that, we need at least 1024 will, 1 common Tartaric Gem, 1 large bloodstone tile, 1 potency core, and 1 demon will crystal. And now we can make our crystal will clusters by combining 4 of the same type in the Hellfire Forge. Alright, now that we have our initial crystals and crystal clusters, we actually don't need the resonance of the faceted crystal anymore. So we're just going to dismantle this. We're actually going to repurpose this Master Ritual Stone down here. And we're going to make the crack of the fractured crystal, which is basically going to, once we replace these crystals down and start inserting crystals into these crucibles here, they're going to start growing these crystals again. And if we don't put this ritual down, we're going to have to harvest it by hand. So this ritual will just drop them on the ground, and then we'll use something like a range collector to put them back into the drawers. And basically it's a self-repeating system. So they get extracted, they go into the crucible, they get burned up, they grow the crystals get broken, and then they go back into the drawers. Alright, I've gone ahead and placed down the ritual down there and activated it. So if we place down our crystals, it's actually not going to do anything until we start putting them into the actual crucibles. So I'm going to get a few item conduits and start filtering. Alright, I've gone ahead and just put a drawer controller on top and not filter, I just disconnected the item conduits from each other, and they're all getting inserted. The 2 rituals are working, these crystals are growing, they're getting harvested by the range collector and going into the drawer. And a side effect of this is we can now automate the Hellfire Forge, as if we put a Tartaric Gem, it'll start filling up with will from the chunk. So we don't have to worry about will anymore as long as we do it inside of this chunk. Alright, it's been a couple days later, and I made a few adjustments to this, mainly on the bottom here. Now, instead of just only spawning chickens, we're spawning chickens, cows, and pigs, and that actually helps the ritual up here speed up these crystals even more by having a diverse selection of mobs. So with that little modification there, we're now backlogging on crystals. And I also added void upgrades and storage upgrades to these drawers. That's why these have 40 and these only have 6. Because these filled up and obviously this range collector got full. So these are all fully upgraded with storage upgrades and void upgrades. Alright, now that we have access to the Ritual Diviner Dusk version and the activation crystal, we're also going to automate Life Essence. And to do that, we're going to make the Well of Suffering. And what this ritual is going to do is, over time, it's going to damage mobs, and that's going to transfer into life essence there. And we're actually going to have to replace all of our runes of self-sacrifice with regular sacrifice runes, but we'll get to that later. But the mob we're going to use is witches, as they drink healing potions when they're damaged, so we don't have to set up any other... We don't have to make any regen potions for them or any rituals of regen. Just basically have to place them down, name them so they don't despawn, and once we activate it, they should stay alive indefinitely and fill up our altar with blood. Alright, I've gone ahead and put all of our 16 witches inside, and they're all named, and if we activate the actual ritual, they should start taking damage. And our altar should be filling up. It is? Alright. And I'm also going to take the time here to replace all of our self-sacrifice runes with regular runes of sacrifice. We're just going to use magician orbs, and for the tier 4, obviously the master blood orbs. And also at the Well of Suffering down there, I added 48 more witches. So we should be able to sustain most of these. Maybe not the tier 4 essences, but definitely the tier 1 and tier 2. But yeah, I've already started backlogging on all of these, mainly the tier 1s. But yeah, our alchemy tables are now fully automatic. Now that we have automated will production, this means we can finally automate our Hellfire forges. And I've begun the process of automating the tier 1s, and this is just the air reagent. And basically, I just have an interface down here supplying all the items. They're fed into item ducts with retrievers on them. Then some of the retrievers just have keep 4 stocks in inventory. This one has 1 because the stack size of this is only 1. And then for the bottles, I just have keep 2 stacks in there since the recipe takes 2 glass bottles each. And then I just made a whole bunch of Tartaric Gems. They get filled up because the well in the chunk is full. And yeah, it just crafts and then it gets extracted by that servo. And I have a drawer wall here where all the different reagents and such are going to go. Yeah, the basic system. So I'm going to automate all the other 15 reagents and I'll be back. Alright, I think I'm going to call it here for this episode. Also begun automating the tier 2 essences, but in between episodes I'll get the tier 3 and tier 4 essences done. But yeah, thanks for watching.